So let's start with our webinar today. Today what we're going to talk about is Bonita 7.6 version that have been released the 7th of December. And we're going to talk about the add-on Bonita Continuous Delivery. So first, let's take a moment to see what we do at BonitaSoft. So our platform is used to build a living application. So what is a living application? It's basically a business application that you can customize and that is responsive, smart, and connected. So we are taking the approach of the model view controller pattern to build those living applications where the business logic, the controller part of the application, will be implemented using a process-based approach. And you will be able to connect the process to third-party system using connectors. You can implement advanced logic using script language like Groovy or even Java language code. You can define different business rules, implement event-based behavior, and so on. So business logic of your application can be really advanced. Then to integrate and to manipulate the business data, we have a business data layer in the product where you will store all the data that is produced by your business logic. And finally, to interact with the end users, you will need a user interface, or the view part of the application. That view will be responsive and can be highly customized. So you can have the same user interface displayed across different devices, such as mobile, tablets, laptop, and so on. And this is been released in June 2015. So now our technology to build a living application is really mature, and we have a lot of customer projects that have been successfully implement business application using our platform. So to build the business application, the developers are using the Bonita platform. So this is a low-code platform where the developers can design graphically the processes for the business logic part. They can also use the Bonita Studio, which is a desktop application based on Eclipse, by the way. They can use the studio to configure the behavior, implement the behavior of their process, connect this process to different system, implement all the business logic using Groovy code. So there is no real limit on where the developer can take the application using the Bonita Studio. It's a real development environment. The second part is the UI designer. So it's a web-based form designer using AngularJS and Bootstrap technology. So you have a set of widgets that you can drag and drop to build complex forms, and each widget can be customized and configured. You can also create your own widgets if you know how to code in AngularJS using the tool, either directly in the UI designer or using a framework to build your widget outside the UI designer and then import them into the UI designer. Then when you build an application from A to Z using the platform, you can deploy that application to the Bonita portal. So the Bonita portal is a web-based application that require an application server to be run, such as Tomcat or Wildfly. And the Bonita portal will let the end users interact with the application that are deployed on the Bonita portal, but it will also let the administrator configure the platform, so deploy new application, configure who can access the platform, monitor the application health, and so on. And finally, here you can see an example of an application deployed on the Bonita portal, and that same application can run on a desktop or on a mobile, thanks to the Bootstrap technology. We have implemented a mechanism of live updates on top of the living application that lets the developers to apply changes to any part of the application without redeploying the entire application set. So basically, the application has been broken down to different artifacts that let you create a complete modular application, which give you a lot of flexibility when it comes to applying changes on a application deployed on production. If you want, you can redeploy only one form of a specific process, or you can redeploy one page of a specific menu entry without affecting the whole application. You can also redeploy the business data model or a new process, or even change the configuration of a connector. So there is a lot of flexibility around the configuration and applying changes on the fly to the application. So we can quickly, by example, change the look and feel of the entire pages. So now we got a pretty good understanding, even though it was pretty quick, on what Bonita is used for and what kind of living application you can build on. Let's try to focus on the points that we are interested in today is the application deployments. So by default, when you are using the Bonita platform, the application deployment will work this way. So basically, we have a development team that work on the same application. So each developer will have a Bonita Studio installed on their workstation, and they will collaborate through a common source repository. So they will all commit the source code of that repository to the same source version control. Then Bonita Studio will gather all the application code on the same studio and will build the application. So you have a build phase implemented in the studio, and that build phase will basically take each single part of the application and generate an artifact. So you will have an artifact for each single process definition that compose your application. Those process definition archive will contain all the forms for that specific process. You will also have all the REST API extension. So each REST API extension will generate a zip file if you extended the initial capability of the REST API engine. You will have pages if you create application. You will have a archive per pages. You will have a descriptor file for the application itself, and so on. So you can quickly have a lot of artifacts that has required to deploy your application if your application is quite complex. All those artifacts will then be deployed through the Bonita portal or through REST API. The Bonita portal basically exposes a set of REST API that let you programmatically deploy application. But let's say you go to the Bonita portal and you deploy manually all the processes, pages, REST API, and application. And then you configure the application and you make it available to your user. So I'm sure you already realize that is not ideal because it requires a lot of manual work. So that's why we came up with a new add-on at Bonita called the Bonita Continuous Delivery add-on. So an add-on, what it is, it's basically an extension of the initial products that run independently, but that cannot be run without the Bonita platform. So it's a completely different project that will enhance the initial capability of the Bonita platform. Its main objective is to give the development team or the DevOps role specifically a set of tools to smoothly deploy an application into a fresh new environment. As you already understand, building all the different artifacts and deploying them to the Bonita portal can be really optimized if you manage to automate this process. But also, if you need to deploy this built application into a new environment, you also need to consider how you're going to deploy a new instance of your Bonita portal somewhere in the cloud or in premises. And that's also what the Bonita Continuous Delivery add-on will aim to solve. So let's take a deeper look to how it's going to work. So first, let's see what are the different components that are present in this add-on. First, it's cloud ready. So it's fully integrated with Amazon AWS Stack Services. By the way, Bonita is now a official technology partner with Amazon, so that help us integrate our module or add-on with the AWS Stack Service. It's environment agnostic, so it can be deployed. It can be used to deploy Bonita and application on Bonita on the cloud, but also on premise. We use a Bonita official Docker image, so we have community Bonita official Docker image available on the Docker Hub repository, and we have the tool available for our customers to build a subscription version of the Bonita Docker image. So the Bonita Docker image is the portal itself, not the studio. Resource management through Ansible. So we use Ansible to coordinate the deployment of Bonita on the cloud. And we also, the add-on also manage the provisioning of the different infrastructure that are required to deploy Bonita, and it will also help you pre-configure the Bonita deployments, and will help you through the different phase of creating the version of Bonita. And finally, we can implement a complete continuous integration pipeline using Jenkins in association with the add-on Bonita Continuous Delivery. So here is an example of the Jenkins part. So basically, that's how we aim to solve the issue of deploying quickly a new version of an application that is built with Bonita. So as I said previously, you will use a Bonita Studio to commit the application source in a source control repository. And then you will have Jenkins that will have a pipeline that will take care of the deployment of the application. So first, he will check out all the sources. Then he will use the workspace API provided by Bonita Studio to build the application artifacts. Then he will deploy those artifacts to a target machine either on premises or on AWS cloud. Then you can run automatic tests. And finally, you can deploy that machine or make it available as a UAT machine. And if you want to go a step further, you can almost deploy on production for final users. So you can imagine with that in place, you can solve or you can save a lot of time in deployment. But how do you understand? For that to work, you need previous steps to be completed, which is the deployment of the Bonita platform on the cloud or on premises automated. So that's what the Bonita Continuous Delivery add-on solved in this version 1 of the add-on. That's what we have right now. It's the deployment of Bonita platform in the cloud. In the future, we aim to implement the build of application using Jenkins. So basically, what we have, it's a Docker container that we call the controller, so the Bonita Continuous Delivery controller, or the BCD controller. And that controller will provide command to create new infrastructure on the cloud or on premises. So you will be able to configure or to define your infrastructure. So say I want to deploy a Bonita cluster with 1 load balancer, 3 Bonita nodes, and 1 database. So you will configure that through scenarios. And using the controller, you will be able to create those infrastructure. Then using another command deploy, you will be able to deploy the Bonita stack in the newly created infrastructure. And you will also be able to destroy when you don't need them anymore. So let's take a deeper look to the controller part. So here is a diagram of the controller part. So as I said, it's a Docker container. So what we provide with the add-on, it's a Docker image of that controller and the documentation to create the Docker container from that Docker image. So when you create the Docker container, what you do is you provide as a mount folder where you will have the AWS credential stored to connect to the AWS instance, SSH key that is referenced in your AWS instance, and the BCD scripts that are used by the Docker container to deploy the different module on the cloud. Internally, the Docker container uses Terraform to deploy the infrastructure in AWS, and you use Ansible to deploy and configure the different instances in the cloud. And finally, we have a set of scripts that will provide the developer or the user of that container to interact with the tool. So what are the values of this new add-on? Basically, with the version 1.0, we provide a set of tasks for the system admin or the DevOps to quickly deploy and make available new pre-configured Bonita platform on the cloud on premises. That can be really quickly, especially if you run the controller directly from AWS instance. We also provide a mechanism to automatically get a Bonita license if you're a customer. It's compatible on AWS and on premises, and you use standard tools such as Docker for the BCD controller container, for the Bonita platform deployment, and for the Bonita database. Everything is Dockerized. We use Ansible and Python to automate the deployment. In the future, what we aim to do is obviously provide the tooling to automate the deployment of applications using Jenkins. But also we'd like to improve the Bonita platform to offer high performance and scalability. And we also like to provide more tools to ease with the platform maintenance, so automated backup of running Bonita platform instance, or easily update or automate the upgrade of the Bonita version when the new release came out. So let's have a quick look on how it looks. So here I have my command line where I have downloaded the add-on BCD. So basically, when I get from the customer portal the add-on, I downloaded this archive, and when I expand it, it created this folder Ansible 1.00. Now, if I go there, I can take a look to script that I created. Basically, this script will create the Docker container from the Docker image BCD controller. I will provide 3 volumes. So the first one, .boot2, will contain the AWS credential that I use to connect to my account. Then I provide a path to this current folder, as you can see here. This folder contains the different scenarios that I will describe after that's going to be used by the container to create instances in my AWS instance. And finally, I provide a path to my SSH private key. So I can quickly create a new container, and I automatically open a bash shell script in that container. So here I can see the volume that I mounted, the Ansible volume. And here I can use the BCD command line that is provided in the container. So what we're gonna do is create a new instance in the cloud. So if I take my management console here, I have my Bonita console, AWS console here, and as you can see, I have no running instances. So what I'm gonna do is use the Bonita Continuous Delivery add-on to create quickly a new Bonita platform. So first, I need to start my SSH agents, so I can provide with the private key used by AWS. Okay, I just need the key. Okay, now my key is added to my agent. I can start the script. So what I do basically is I provide the scenarios, and I say don't ask me for any confirmation, and then I can chain the command, so I can create the infrastructure and deploy Bonita in the infrastructure. So it's gonna take a couple of minutes. While this is running, let's take a look to the scenarios. So here I have an example of my scenario basically, and we can see that it's pretty easy to understand, especially if you're familiar with Ansible. So here in the first part, we have all the configuration for AWS. So we provide where is the private key and the key pair name, provide with the region, the type of image that we want to start, and the type of instance for Bonita in the database. Then we have a part for Bonita where we can specify the version of Bonita we want to deploy, the edition, the type of database we want to use, whether or not we want to deploy Bonita in a cluster, and if so, how many nodes do I want in my cluster. We can specify whether or not the HTTP API should be enabled. Then we can provide configuration for the technical users, and finally the port where Bonita platform will listen. We can configure the email notification. And finally, at the last part, we provide information to connect to the customer account to generate a new license. So here we should see that the script is currently running. So it takes about 5 minutes to basically create all the different required steps. So basically first we had created the infrastructure, as you can see here. And at the end we got the SSH ready from AWS. And on the second part, we basically deploy the Bonita stack. So what we do is prepare the environment. We get Docker installed on the machine. We get Python and the Python module manager deployed on the machine. We will then upload the Docker container and create the new Docker containers that run Bonita. So it makes the deployment really easy, because what we have to do basically is just upload the Docker image and start it with the right information. So the Docker image is a little bit big, so it can take a few minutes. Also, what is really interesting is if the script fail at any point, we can just restart it, and it will start again from the same point. So it should be ready in a minute. So while it's uploading, I just want to let you know that at the end of the session, we will have a quick Q&A session, so you can start typing your question directly in the GoToWebinar tool, and I will answer those questions at the end of the session. If we look into the EC2 console, we should already see that we get new instances created here and here. So we have one instance for Bonita and one instance for the database. If we decide to deploy a cluster, we will have multiple BCD Bonita nodes, and we have an extra node for the load balancer, and everything will be already configured. So the load balancer will be configured to balance the load basically on the different nodes of the cluster. So here we can see that we are getting the license at the end. I just take a few more seconds. Okay, so now we just need to wait for Bonita to start up. So we got everything deployed, everything ready, and we are just waiting now for Bonita to start up. So while Bonita is starting up, I'm going to continue the presentation, and I'll come back at the end to show you the result. So if we go back to the presentation, the next part is what has been added with the new release Bonita 7.6. So we worked on 3 main topics. The first one is trying to add value to help with the development of business application using Bonita, because that's our core value. So for that, we added 2 new features. The first one is the capability of managing profile directly in the studio. So if you're familiar with the previous version of Bonita, we recently added the ability to create application directly in the studio. Before, we were able to do it only from the portal. And that was the same thing with profile. So we brought back the application creation in the studio, and we did the same now with the profile. We did that for first make the development experience consistent for the developer, and second to have all the information related to an application in the studio repository, and therefore in the source version repository. So now we have all the application elements in the source code repository. So it will enable us or enable users, developers to create a continuous integration pipeline easily. The second item that we added was a workspace import and installation. Basically, before the 7.6, you will have one chance to import a previous workspace from previous installation. It will be at the installation phase. When you run the installer, it will ask you if you want to import a previous workspace. We basically made that functionality available from the studio menu. So you can at any time open your new version of Bonita, go on the menu import and select workspace, and there you can point to a previous old workspace and it will import it to your current workspace. Make sure that when you use that functionality you have a current empty workspace, because you might override current changes if you don't. Second big part is the performance optimization. So I will try to describe that in more details in the upcoming slide. And the last one is a techno update. So to follow the market on technical environments, we added the support of Eclipse 4.7. So that's for the studio part, because the studio is built on top of Eclipse. That brings us support for 4K screen, by example, and different bug fixes and more stability. We now provide a bundle on Tomcat 8.5, so that we follow the same trend with Wildflies, basically using Java 8. We support Ubuntu 16.04, and for the Microsoft stack, we now support SQL Server 2016 officially, but we did test on SQL Server 2014 and it works perfectly well, and on Windows Server 2016. We also provide now one connector to connect to any version of the SQL Server. So let's take a deeper look to the performance parts. Working with our community and our customers, we did a big focus on performance improvements in that version, on both the front part and the backend parts. So first, on the front parts, we implemented 3 mechanisms that dramatically improved the performance, especially on slow connection, which is really important for us as we have a lot of projects that are displayed on a mobile device. So as you can see, before the 7.6, we will display an application, so some kind of application like EV application, maybe in 15 seconds, and we reduce that to 2 seconds. That is the time for the second display time when the cache is enabled. How did we do that, and what does that mean for your project? First, we implemented a new default layout. So the layout is used when you create application to define the menu bar and the navigation in your application. So we provide now a new default layout that that is optimized in performance. That means for you that if you want to benefit from this improvement, moving in 7.6, you will have to create a new layout and apply the change to that new custom layout to benefit from it. The second one is the minification of the JavaScript. So as you know, when you create a page, you basically compose the page using a widget that the UI designer provides. Each widget has a view and has a controller. That controller is a JavaScript file that implement basically behavior of the widget. Before 7.6, you will when you will export the page, you will export each single JavaScript file used by the widget in your page. And when the browser will load that page, you will have to download all the JavaScript file. What we did was implementing a build phase on the UI designer, so it's transparent. When you export the page, it's actually building the page. And when the page is built, it will take all the JavaScript provided by the different widgets that you're using. You will merge them and minify them, so you just have one single JavaScript file for all the widgets, and that JavaScript file will be minified. So it saves a lot of time in accessing the server to get information. The last one is a cache busting mechanism, where we guarantee cache resources while we still guarantee the live update capability. So basically now, when you have a new page in 7.6, each asset that the page is using, so it can be a CSS file, image, or JavaScript, each asset that this page is loading will have a hash value associated in the parameter to load that resource. And if that resource changes, the hash value will be modified and the cache will be renewed. But by default, every resources will be cached by the engine now. So it makes the loading really quicker, because it doesn't need to go to the server to get the dependency. We just go get them from the cache. But if you redeploy a new version of your resource, the cache busting will notify that the hash value has changed, and it will go get the new value of that, the new version of that resources from the server, and update its cache. You can find documentation on how all this works on the release notes. Finally, the engine performance optimization. We worked with a customer that had a huge project involving hundreds of process definition to dramatically improve the startup time of the Bonita platform. Before the 7.6, what would happen is, at the startup time, the engine will create a isolated class path for each single process definition that is deployed in a Bonita platform, whether that process definition is enabled or not. And to build this class path, the engine will go to the database and load all the jars to populate the class path. And it will do that for all the process definition. We optimize that by adding a caching layer. So basically now, when the engine builds the different class paths for each single process definition, it will still have to go get the jars, but before it goes to the database to get the jar, it will check if that specific jar is in the cache. So that's all for me. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them. Before that, we're going to take a look to make sure the process has finished. So yes, it finished. And I can get quickly a look to the final result. So we have deployed a new version, and I can check that. Yeah, we get a new version pre-configured and ready to be used. So if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask me. So I have a question. Can you deploy with the BCD using RDS instead of the DB on EC2? Yes, you should be able to do that. I haven't done the test myself, but this should be supported. So for those who are not familiar, RDS is a database service, is a database as a service provided by AWS. So the question was, can we use that instead of like the traditional database to store data in Bonita? And the answer should be yes, but yes to be confirmed. So I have another question here. Is Ansible provided with the Bonita 7.6? So basically Ansible is part of the Bonita Continuous Delivery add-on, and it's provided directly. It's pre-installed in the Docker image that we provide, and it will be used by the container to deploy the Bonita stack on EC2. I have another question. In case of a workspace import, are we doing a copy of the workspace, or is it a link to the existing workspace? So basically, when you import to old workspace, you will copy the content, migrate it, and merge it into your current workspace. So that merge part is important because you can lose information if you don't do that on the empty workspace. Another question: any of these features available on the community edition? So all the performance improvements are available on the community edition, as well as the workspace import. The profile management is only for the subscription edition, and the Bonita Continuous Delivery add-on is only for the subscription edition. So if you are interested, I will let you contact Bonita to get more information. I have another question here. Is it possible to define an application for different profile, for multiple profile? So no, right now an application can be associated with only one profile, and we don't have the possibility of creating an application for multiple profile. I don't see other questions. So if you have any, please ask them now. No other question. So I will close the webinar now. Again, thanks for your time today. I wish you a good end of day.